You know, at the start of the series, I said I need loads of stuff. Well, I think I may have made an error. I've got way too much stuff now and nowhere to put any of it. I mean, look at what I had to do just to run 1 or 2 tests for this farm. I know we may have done it at 10 times the tick rate, but that's not important right now. What is important is that I had to ruin my beautiful platform just to have enough storage space. So today, you get to watch me figure out a way to address all of that. Welcome back to... Now before you all jump to some weird conclusions, we're doing Shulker box loading mechanics today. I want to give myself the freedom to produce as much of whatever random resource we're working on as humanly possible. And yeah, well, I've got no clue how to build any of these Shulker loading things. Whoops. And since I'm not allowing myself to copy other people's designs, I need to make my own. I think it could still be useful to use a structured engineering approach to make everything easier to kind of think about. Plus, I really like slideshows. We're doing more slideshows. So let's start off by looking at the approach we used for the bamboo last episode and see if we can improve on it. The method we've been looking at is up on this board here, and we can start off with a quick recap. This is a set of steps that you can follow when you are trying to solve a problem, and a lot of it is targeted at more complex systems. So we've got a lot of steps here that just simplify and break down systems, just make it easier to think about and easy to consider solutions for. Step number 1 we defined is what problem am I trying to solve, which I wish I could control Z in Minecraft. You know, how good would that be? Let me bring out a sword so that doesn't happen again. All right, we're starting off with what problem are we trying to solve, and that should be the first step in any set of steps you follow to arrive at some solution for a problem. Defining the problem is really important, so this stays. Step 2 is what are the subsystems, so that's just kind of where you break it down into pieces. 3, what are the options for each subsystem, so this is where you get into the design work. Step 4, you go back and look at all your options and then choose a combination that makes sense to you. Number 5, you build it, and number 6, you iterate. So I think this method worked fine. I mean, we got a few working designs out of it by the end, but it does have a huge flaw. It takes so long. I was trying to hit every possibility for each subsystem so that we don't accidentally miss out on some really elegant solutions, but that kind of just made this whole process into a bit of a chore. I mean, I had a lot of fun and I learned a lot, but it was a little bit too much. So that brings me to the first adjustment we need to make. We don't need to generate different concepts for each subsystem. We can think of some and like still put them down and stuff, consider pros and cons, but we can leave a lot of the comparison and the experimentation to the design phase. Just this part took so long. That didn't end up actually changing anything on the board here, but it's kind of more a mental shift regarding how we approach steps 3 and 4. The next change I want to make is I want to clarify the second point here. I still think the functional breakdown of a system is the most important step for anyone who's new to this, at least. These designs can be very intimidating because there is a lot happening, but you know, how to eat an elephant and all that. Instead of calling them subsystems, we're simplifying it to functions or actions. Which functions need to be performed and in what order? For bamboo last episode, that would have been grow, detect, break, and collect. I'll still end up thinking of some random overcomplicated names for all these things, but what's important is what function they need to perform in the context of the system as a whole. So not actually changing what we're doing in the step, but kind of refocusing it. Now, there's one more admin related thing I need to get out of the way before we get started here. So let me do that quickly. So this is the first building block in what I'm going to call the ME matrix. So we're in the same world as before. We just have a structure now to store all our old projects. Since the bamboo farm is now safely tucked away, we can get rid of it up on the surface and clear the platform to start working on the shulker loader. Now we should be able to safely get rid of this. And there we go, minus all the hopper minecarts. All right. Good as new. Now that that's taken care of, we have some shulker loader unloader thingies to design. I know you're excited for this. It's finally time for this slideshow. Right, let's get back up to the sky green screen place so we can finally get to the functional decomposition. Yay. Hey, hold on. You. Yeah, you. Don't skip this part. It's important, right? Trust me. Now, today we're going to start off by looking at a shulker loader, and then we'll reshuffle all the functions later into a unloader. They should be pretty similar, hopefully, so it won't take too much extra time. First thing we need is something to place our shulker box for us. If you're going to try and pick up this design process yourself from step 3 onwards, which isn't a bad idea for anyone still learning, you can either do this with a dispenser or by hand, so keep that in mind. The next thing you need is a hopper shoveling items into it. Once again, you can do this by hand too if you want to adapt the system for random items you're putting into the box yourself. See, we're getting through these at lightning pace. Let's keep going. Now you need to know when the box is full. Most people would do this with a comparator. In fact, I couldn't come up with any other way to do it, so yeah, moving swiftly onwards. Now the box is full and you need to break it. No reason not to just use a piston here, but if you're feeling dangerous, go ahead and blast it with some TNT. That might make the rest of your system require a redesign though, so don't say I didn't warn you. The last thing you need is the shulker picker-upper. You don't need me to explain that to you. You can either design a way to pick up the shulker box after it's broken, or you can not do that and just kind of let it be. You know, to each their own. Something that is important to remember here is that this hopper can't be unlocked until the box is broken. Otherwise, you've just invented a really expensive solution for a job another hopper could have done. Last thing is that whatever method you use to detect when the box is full will also need to signal the breaker and then the system responsible for placing the next box. Once we get to designing, you'll see this slide has grossly oversimplified that. And that should do it for the loader. You can just kind of shuffle these around and boom, hopper unloader. You'll still need to place a shulker box, detect when it's empty this time, break it, and then place another. The weird thing is going to be figuring out how to get the shulker box into a different hopper than the one below it, because obviously that's the one pulling the items out. But yeah, I'm going to hope and pray that the piston just takes care of that. Otherwise, we might be in integration hell again sooner than I thought after all those hopper minecarts from last week. Ugh. Alright, so I would say that was enough of the green screen, so let's get to some actual design work. We should be able to run through all these functions relatively quickly because none of them are very complex, but I think it would still be a good idea to just double check that my assumptions on all of these were actually correct and I actually do know how to build each function. In order to place a shulker box, all we probably need is just a dispenser and a lever. All right, that did exactly what I thought it would. And just to double check, we can put this in any orientation. I might need to fill the old inventory with shulker boxes so that doesn't keep happening. And I'll just do that there. Yep, that's exactly what I thought it would. So that's the placer, step number 1, and that was pretty easy. Next up, the filler, and that might actually be easier. All right, hopper going into the shulker box. Does that actually go in? Yeah, it does. All right, that was easy enough. Filler, done. Full detectors next, and like I said in the old slideshow, the only way I know of doing that is with a comparator. Now, one thing I do know about shulker loaders is that a lot of designs, or at least some of the popular designs, are one wide, meaning there's a comparator in the design, but there's no comparing. So I don't actually know how that's done or how that's supposed to be done, because all that I could come up with was the comparator coming out like this. All right, this bad boy is full now, and this should be outputting a signal strength of 15. So let's test that. And that's the last one that should be powered. That one is off. Did I count wrong? Oh, okay. So this is the 15th. That one should be off. Okay, cool. And we also have to be sure that the last item and not the last stack triggers this one. So let's just put a lamp here. I don't think in my life I've struggled that much to place a single block, but okay, there we go. Out of what I think is 15 powering that lamp, now we can remove one item and that should go off. All right. Well, that's not helped. All right, I never thought this test would be so difficult, but still off. Last item switches it on. Okay, that just confirms that this needs to be 15. If at this point you don't know how comparators work, I would recommend... Actually, I'll add a whatever good explanation I can find to the description of the video. So if you're not sure how comparators work, then definitely go have a look, because they are one of the slightly more complex redstone, or the slightly more weird redstone components. So worth having a look at that. So since this is a comparator, it will compare what's behind it to what's on the left side. So all we need to do is we need to feed a signal strength of 15 into the side here, and then that will only come on when we get a signal strength of 15, or in other words, when the shulker box is full. The way I've always done that is with a lever and a comparator, just like this. So you'll see when we take one item out there, it goes off, when we add it back, it goes on. So these few blocks here is what I would call the full detector, because once it's full, this turns on. So we can just look at this dust as a kind of flag for when that box is full. Now, like I was saying, I know there are one wide designs, but I'm not sure how that would work. There's got to be some trick with like overpowering redstone or something like that, where you've got one source that's 15 or one source that's 14 or something, and only when this is 15 that this thing will come on or something like that. But I don't even know where to begin searching for however that's supposed to be done. So this is what we're going with. So spoilers, we're not coming up with any one wide designs today, but I'm going to try my best to keep it to a 2 wide, I think. Right, that should do it for the full detector. Next up is the breaker, and that's fortunately another easy one. Right, that's all you need, a piston with a pulse, and that breaks the block. You don't need to go much more complicated than this. I'm sure there are different ways of doing this, but this is what we're going to go with. Last thing you need is pickup, and that would technically just be a single hopper like this. Since I'm in creative, I'm going to have to demonstrate with another piston here. This hopper picked up the shulker box just after it was broken, so just to show you again. Landed in that hopper. Now, what makes this slightly more difficult is this hopper will pick up anything you put in this shulker box. So we need to remember to lock it, do the break action, and as you do the break, we unlock that hopper. So let's figure out how to do that with observers in this section. So we want to use a torch because we want to have it locked by default, like so. And then we can send a pulse into this block. And then when that happens, the hopper becomes active and it should pick up the shulker box. And you want the timing of that to be pretty precise. So I think we're going to use observers here. So we want to observe this piston activating. That signal should get passed through this block onto this redstone. Yep, gets activated and we see a little pulse like that. We want to strongly power this block, which I just want to say strong power, weak power, all that stuff. Don't fully understand it. All I know is that a dust won't work and a repeater will. And I don't really need much more information than that. So that's good enough for now. Now what we want to see is this piston activating should open that hopper up. The timing may have been not enough. So let's try 2 ticks. I'm just going to chuck a shulker box onto the top. All right, we want to observe the piston, and when the piston triggers, we can just send a little pulse, and we're going to need 2 ticks. So you can either do 2 ticks with, I think you should be able to do it with an extra observer. Let's see. And we change this back to 1 tick. Okay, yeah, we need it to be active for 2 ticks. We don't need it to be delayed by 2 ticks. That's the distinction, and I think the observer just delays it. All right, that's good to know. So we will, at the very least, need either 2 repeaters onto separate spots, or just 1 repeater with 2 ticks. I'm pretty sure those are the same thing. If they're not, you can correct me. All right, that should do it for the pickup system. This ended up being a little bit more complex than the other ones, but it's not too bad. And it is a pretty important part in getting the whole thing to work. So, yeah. Looking at the platform here and what we are trying to do with that matrix down there is I think we could, since the bamboo pretty much took up 4 of these 2x2 chunk spots, I think we can probably do the loader just in this little area and the unloader just in this area. And I don't think that should be too difficult. And in that way, we can kind of put 4 of the smaller farms together in that matrix and we don't waste a bunch of space. With these being chunk sized, we don't really have a center block. So I'm just going to put this sign off to the left here. So first we'll do the loader, I think. And then over in this chunk, we'll do the unloader. So first thing we need is, I think let's start off as always with just a chest. And we can put it pretty centrally. And I've gone with 2 hoppers going down into this chest because we're going to have to lock at least 1 hopper. Meaning we need at least 1 more hopper to pull the shulker boxes out of it. So the shulker box is going to be living on top of this. And I want to either dispense it. Let's see if we can leave the top open for now. So let's see if we can dispense it in from the side here. I've gone with 1 hopper on the side for now. We can expand on that in the future, but let's just fill this up so we can do at least some tests. as expected, the shulker box is placed. Next, we'd want to check when it's full. So let's do that with the lever like that. You know, that might technically make it 3 wide, since I can't figure out how else to check when it's full. But it should be okay for now. Yep, that needs to go there. I've already kind of used up all the sides of the shulker box now, so I'm going to go ahead and fill it in from the back, and then we'll try and put the piston on top, I think. We don't technically need this block, so I'm just going to remove that. And then we do have the freedom to move this off to the side as well. So when this fills up, we are going to want a torch to turn off. So we could do a torch on top of this. We can probably put an observer facing the torch to power that. Okay, so the thinking here is once this reaches full, or once this is filled, it should power this, the torch should turn off, the observer will see that it has turned off, and the piston will fire. What I need to remember is that when it fires, this will disappear, this will go off, and then it'll fire again. So the piston will go twice, but we'll see whether that becomes an issue. I'm gonna have a little shulker box that's just full of stuff here on the side, and then I could just control middle click, put that on here, and it should fill up. Oh, okay, but they're all going down, obviously, because we haven't locked it yet. So before testing, we're going to need to figure that out. Okay, we'll power one of these blocks next to the hopper before we put it in, so we don't keep running into this issue. All right, that should be full now, which should be full soon. There we go. Oh, that worked. I can't believe that worked. Okay, so the braking works. We can signal when it's full to break it. Okay, at this point, I've put the hopper back here because it's going to be impossible to test this unless we do the locking stuff first. So we're going to go for the pickup now. You don't have to build it in this order. This is just the way you have to kind of think about the functions, right? When this triggers, this should go off for 1 tick from this. Maybe we do this and then we only do 1 torch. No, that creates a clock. Nope. Okay, we're just doing 2 torches, I guess. It's just going to look silly. And then we needed 2 ticks, right? So now, this is a full shulker box. That's worked. It looks kind of stupid, but it worked. Alright, that's very satisfying. I'm going to try that again. Okay, let's try an empty shulker box that is being filled from up here. When it becomes full, is it broken? That's the question. Dare I say, I think that worked. One more time, because I seriously can't believe my eyes here. Well, that was a full one. That's not what I meant to do at all. Empty one. Full one on the side. Let's take a step back. And now. Picked it up. And there it is. I don't know if it's just me, but I think that's super cool. That kind of ended up being way less complicated than I thought it would be. Because I'm pretty sure we've got the placer now. We've got a way to fill it. We have the detection method in place. The breaker is in place and the pickup is in place. What's left? We need to signal the placer. We haven't done that yet. Okay, I guess we can just detect the piston again, but we need to do it. So this takes 1 tick. This happens instantly. 1 tick later, the piston fires. 1 tick after that. I don't think it's going to be that easy, actually. For now, let's assume we need a dispense or a repeater going into there. That happens. Does that kit pass through? Did they get shot out? Can we just increase the timing to say... Actually, let's try each of them. Yep, okay, that still happened twice because I put it on 1 tick again. Okay, that still triggered twice. That can't be our whole system, right? Is that it? Is that all we need? That's an empty box now. Full box there. Empty at the bottom. Full box. What? In my head, this was going to be way more complicated to figure out, but that was not that hard, was it? All right. Now, I know we're doing the whole like engineering method thing to make it easier to think about and not necessarily make it easier to build, but make it less daunting to build because you're breaking it down into little bite-sized pieces and problems you can just solve one at a time, much like we did here. But I don't think we can credit it completely with how easy this was to build. I think I may have just overhyped this whole thing in my head a little bit. Okay. I'm still not 100% sure how that's just worked first try, but I think we're going to do a test with stackable or blocks that are stackable to 64. So now this is a shulker box full of iron. This is full of empty ones. As you can see, there's nothing in this bottom chest. And I'm going to place this box, which is the feeder filler thing, on top of this. Okay. And then I think you just have to trigger this once to get it started. That might be a while. So yeah, I'll be back in a minute. I just want to say this process is ridiculously painful. All right, it's empty. And well, that's not really what you want to see, is it? Okay, I had messed with the timing by putting a repeater there. So we're going to have to go through that painful process one more time. I don't know if this is technically double hopper speed, but you know, actually I think it's most definitely isn't double hopper speed. It's still single. It might be speeding it up a little bit. You know what? I need to do whatever I can. Get both emptying out. Yeah, all we're getting now is just this hopper backing up. Maybe because that shulker box wasn't there. It's still not keeping up, but it is what it is at this point. I just need to see this cycle. So I am messing with the tick rate at the moment, just to kind of get this to speed up, because I can't think of any other ways to do it. And I also can't monitor the shulker box. I guess I just have to wait.
6.5 hours later.
By my math, we should be pretty close now. At some point, we do need to go take care of that village. That thing is still burning somehow. I'm 100% convinced this thing is never going to fill up. Do I not have enough items? What's going on? They're still going in. Come on, man. You can do it.
1 eternity later.
That worked. It worked. And I only mostly missed it. I can't believe that worked. So I think let's try and wrap this around the corner. We should be able to do this with dust. And I say we move back to using swords, because it seemed that was the much easier method. So we want to wrap this around this way, just so we can make it too wide. And then does that get powered if I put a block next to it like that? It does not. So we need to add dust. That won't work, will it? Now what do we do? Is that going to make a clock? I seriously hope not. It looks like that worked. This has been a resounding success. So I'm very happy with this design as is. I don't think I'm going to put too much effort into trying to improve it. I'm happy with this. I don't need to fit a bunch next to each other, but we could potentially think about how tileable it would be. All we need now is to put shulker boxes in there. In both of these, actually. You want to cycle each of them once. We don't really have a way of doing that. I guess we'll just do a button. Okay, and then we just take a full box. And, okay, we're going to place on here first and then there second. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I don't know why I counted twice. This one should cycle first and then that one should cycle after. So I don't know how that worked, because this is on 1 tick and we found that they should be on 2. So I don't actually know. I'm going to leave it on 2 and not experiment with that too much because, you know, but that seems to be a too wide tileable design that we've come up with here. I would say I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think that's too bad at all for a first try. Now, what is going to bother me is how to make it 1 wide. For now, I'm going to say I don't need to make it 1 wide, but I'm not sure whether that's making me feel any better. All right, we're going to do a little special segment. I've given it some thought, and I think we have a way of doing this now. Where's the fault detector? Okay, so to make this 1 wide, remember I said you want to overpower this block? So let's use swords as an example. Okay, I don't have any way of actually telling that this is at 14, but at least it's not at 15. We know that. If we use a lever here, that changes its brightness, right? Because if the lever is active, this will be at 15. If it's inactive, this is at 14. So if we move this one back, so this is at 15 and this is at 14. I'm not actually sure what the actual amount is, but basically this is not as bright as it could be. But I think if we add a sword, that changes the level and that should be detectable with an observer. If this works, I'm going to not redesign anything because I think I'm done. I'm happy with my design, but since it was bothering me, I thought we might as well just see whether the idea would work. It does. It does work. All right. Okay, well, there's your second option, guys. For a full detector, you could also do this because what you have now is a way of detecting, not that it's full, but when it becomes full. Okay, so that should be on. I think that's the important part. Okay, one slot and adding the last one. All right, that's how you do it. That's how you do it one wide. That takes care of the top here. It doesn't take care of the bottom though. So since I said, and this is going to kill me, since I said we're happy with this, we're going to leave it. So I think we move on to the unloader at this point because, you know, a few hours ago, I had no clue how these things worked. Now we have a decent tileable to wide design. It's not the worst in the world, right? And the important part is we just designed this ourselves. No tutorials, no nothing. And that feels really good to me. I don't know if that's just a me kind of thing, but that is immensely satisfying. Right. Now, all that is left is to do the hopper unloader. And yeah, hopefully that is the less complicated one of the two. We'll see. We'll see. But I think much like with the loader, I think we should start with 2 chests. In this case, we're splitting shulker boxes and whatever was inside them. So we are going to need 2 outputs. And I've put them in this configuration because we need 1 chain of hoppers pulling the items out of the shulker box. And then we need a different one in the direction the piston is pushing. And unfortunately, that does mean we're going to need to put the piston in this direction. Oops. Okay, so now we can do the empty step. We can do the brake step. We need to detect still. And to kind of keep this as slim as possible, we're using the comparator. Now, in order to detect when something's empty, it's going to be slightly different to the full detector. You're not going to need all the extra nonsense. You just need a torch. Because if there's anything, and this is going to be a problem now. So let's just do that for the time being. Once you put anything in there, this torch will turn off. And once it's empty, the torch will turn on. Now, the issue is, say this becomes empty, so this torch turns on. We detect that and then brake. That becomes a bit of an issue. So I don't think we can just detect the torch directly. So before we do any of that, let's work off the torch being on this block somewhere. And then we basically need to directly from this torch lock this hopper. Because if there's ever a shulker box on top here that's empty, we will be breaking it. So from that, I think we can just power this block. Ooh. And there we go. So in any situation where the shulker box is empty, the hopper underneath it will be locked. So it should be unlocked as long as it's emptying. So let's just do 8 items. Unlocked as long as it's full. And then once it becomes empty, we lock it again. And then after that, we want to do the break, right? So, oh, hold on. Let's just make this a single chest. It looks like the shulker box goes in there. So that is kind of working perfectly. If we break any empty box, the shulker box goes in there. Let's actually see what happens if we do a full box. It also goes in there, but I'm not sure how reliable that would be. The next thing we do is this will go off when the shulker, well, this will go on when the shulker box is on. So we need an on detector. If we do an observer on this, you can see the little dot there on the back of the observer. When it becomes full, it'll trigger, and when it becomes empty, and you don't really want that because there will be a quote-unquote fill up event whenever one is placed. So it'll detect, oh, new full one, and trigger an event, and it'll kind of just break place loop the shulker box over here. So what we want is a monostable circuit, I think, and we should just be able to fit it in right over here. I think if we do a repeater, what you need now is just dust next to this block, and then if I'm not wrong, you can put an observer here and then maybe another one, or actually I think you can just put dust on there and that should trigger the piston. So now what we want to do basically here is when this goes on, the signal gets passed through this block. 1 tick later, this gets lifted up and the signal goes off. So we get a pulse every time it goes on, but not a pulse every time it goes off. So let me demonstrate. Let's just do like 5 items. Okay. No pulse, as you can see. And a pulse came through the moment it was empty. So the moment this became empty, this turned off, obviously. So this turned on, the signal got sent through, and we got a pulse. When this turns on, this turns off, and this signal dies before this block comes down. So that dust never has a chance to go on. So if you have a look at the dust in the bottom left corner there, nothing, and pulse. Okay, that should be our brake mechanism now. So let's just see if we're reliably getting shulker boxes only on the right hand side here. Seems to be the case. So I would say I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, I know we're still missing the placement mechanism, but I've spotted an issue. I would have liked to put the dispenser on this block here, but we're getting signals going through. So if we think about this, the place event will happen when this is off. So we need a pulse to be able to go to this block over here. So imagine the dispenser was here. We need to be able to power this dispenser freely while this is off. But the problem is, while this is off, this whole thing is on. This block is powered, and therefore this dispenser is powered. So if I just use a lever here, you'll see, yeah, that does nothing, because this block down there is already powered. The only alternative, I think, is probably a dispenser facing downwards, right? And we just basically needed to pulse a tick later than the piston. So we should just be able to detect off this block, I think. So if we, that should be a, actually let's prepare a dummy shulker box here with just 8 items. If we place 4 in there, 1 down there, nothing happens when we place it, so that's good. Gets broken. The next one should be emptying now. Gets broken. The next one should be emptying now. And gets broken. I think that's a working design. Now, thinking about the problems with this, there's one kind of glaring issue. If I can show you, this is an empty box right here. So if any empty boxes end up in the system, yeah, it'll get blocked up. There's nothing we can do. Being 100% honest, I don't think that issue is big enough of an issue for me to worry about this right now. I think it's always good to be aware of this kind of stuff and to think about iteration that you'll be doing in the future. We know of one glaring flaw with this design. If we ever circle back to it, or if the flaw becomes an issue, then we can work on it. But just because a design isn't entirely perfect does not mean you can't still use it. I'm doing a lot of justification for my terrible unloaded design here, but I think I'm genuinely happy with it. We can always revisit both of these in the future, since, as you can see in the back there, I did come up with a way of doing 1-wides. I'm not exactly sure how you do a 1-wide unloader yet, but we'll get there. And there we go. Those were steps 4, 5, and 6, all kind of jumbled together in one little segment. And I definitely think next episode we should consider actually combining those into a single step. A little 4-step engineering process is not as satisfying to me as the old 6-step one, because, I don't know, complicated things kind of sound impressive, you know? But that'll be next week's problem. For now, I hope some of you learned something today, and if not, I hope you enjoyed watching me learn a lot of stuff today. If you want to see me struggle with any more of these silly farm designs that other people have already perfected, then yeah, get subscribed. I'll see you guys later.